I always thought life could be divided neatly into categories: work, love, and personal growth. You focus on one at a time, and if you get it right, happiness follows. My father used to say, "A man's worth is measured by what he provides." That idea became my compass, especially as someone who felt I wasn't starting from much. Growing up, I wasn't the guy women gravitated toward. I didn't have the looks or confidence my friends had, and I certainly didn't have the money. Watching others get ahead, in relationships and careers, fed this quiet, gnawing insecurity inside me. It was like I was on the outside, peering into a world I desperately wanted to belong to. When I met Emily, she shattered every preconception I had about relationships. She was kind, supportive, and genuinely saw potential in me when I didn't even see it in myself. At first, I couldn't believe someone like her would choose someone like me. But I told myself, if she believes in you, you can't let her down. And that's when the pressure began. You see, I didn't just want to love Emily, I wanted to prove I was worthy of her. I worked late, took on side gigs, and skipped vacations, always telling myself it was for our future. But deep down, I was chasing a version of myself that I thought she deserved: successful, respected, and capable of giving her the life I thought a man should provide. But the more I chased that dream, the further I felt from her. I didn't notice it at first, but little things started to slip: evenings where we were supposed to talk, plans we'd cancel because I was too busy. Emily never complained, but her silence was louder than any argument. I thought I was doing the right thing by prioritizing my career. After all, isn't that what a man does? Provides? Yet, even as my bank account grew, I couldn't shake this emptiness. It was as if the more I achieved, the less I felt connected to the one person who had always been in my corner. Looking back, I see now that I was trapped in a belief bubble. I thought success was the key to everything: to love, to happiness, to respect. But I didn't realize that in trying so hard to build a perfect life, I was forgetting the most important part of it: living in the moment with Emily. Emily was everything I had never dared to dream of. She was smart, confident, effortlessly beautiful, but above all, she was kind. I wasn't used to kindness like hers. Growing up, I learned quickly that if you wanted something, you had to take it. Life didn't hand you things on a silver platter. So, when Emily came into my life, I didn't quite know how to handle it. At first, I figured it was a fluke. I mean, why would someone like her want to spend time with someone like me? But the more time we spent together, the more I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she saw something in me that I didn't even know existed. She supported my ambitions, encouraged me when I doubted myself, and made me feel like I was capable of achieving things I had never even dared to attempt. But the problem with being around someone so perfect is that it starts to expose all the areas in which you're lacking. With Emily by my side, I felt like I had to live up to her expectations, not just in the big things, but in the little things too. I couldn't afford to fail. Not with her. Not with someone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. The pressure was intoxicating. It wasn't just about my career anymore. It became about proving that I deserved to be with her. I worked harder, pushed myself further, always thinking about the future. I told her, just wait, Emily. We'll have everything: a house, travel, a family. Just let me get there. But I didn't see what I was missing, what I was losing in the process. The late nights I spent at the office or on a job site meant fewer nights together. The long hours I put in meant fewer shared moments. The quiet dinners, the long walks in the park, the laughter over silly inside jokes. Emily never complained. She was always understanding, always patient. But I could see it in her eyes. That soft, almost imperceptible sadness when I'd cancel our plans or choose work over a weekend getaway. I thought she'd be fine, that she would understand. After all, I was doing this for us, for our future. But deep down, I was beginning to realize that I didn't just need to provide for her material things, I needed to be present. And in my quest for success, I'd left her behind. She never said it directly, but Emily's silence spoke volumes. The connection we once had felt like it was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to stop it. I wanted to pull back, to focus on us, but the fear of failing, of not achieving the success I had promised, held me captive. Looking back, I understand now what Emily was trying to tell me. Love isn't about grand gestures or promises of a perfect future. It's about the present, the moments shared, and the attention you give to the person who's standing right beside you. The night it all came to a head was the night I made the decision. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a shouting match or an emotional breakdown. It was a quiet realization, one that crept up on me while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the papers scattered across it. Emily had just gotten home from a weekend visit to her family, and there I was, still working. I hadn't even noticed how late it had gotten. I had promised her we'd spend time together, but there I was, scrambling to finish a project that was due in the morning. She didn't say anything at first. She simply placed a cup of tea in front of me, kissed my cheek, and sat down across from me. I looked up at her, exhausted. And I saw it. The small, but unmistakable, shift in her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. I had seen it before, in the moments when we both knew the truth but didn't want to say it out loud. She had been patient with me, always patient, but I knew she was starting to feel something else. "Michael," she began, her voice soft but firm. "I love you. You know that, right?" I nodded, my heart heavy. "But—" She hesitated, looking down for a moment, as if gathering the courage to say the next words. "But I don't know how much longer I can do this. I don't know how much longer I can wait for you to be present." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I was doing all of this for us. That I was working so hard so we could have everything we wanted, the house, the future, everything. But deep down, I knew I was already losing her. "I just need you, Michael," she said, her voice quivering slightly. "I don't need the fancy dinners or the trips or the expensive gifts. I just need you." And then it hit me. I had built an entire future in my head, one that was full of success and material things, but I had left the most important part behind: her. The love. The connection. The small, everyday moments that made everything worth it. I could see the tears in her eyes. And it broke me. This wasn't just about work anymore. It was about me choosing everything else over the woman who had been my anchor. I couldn't fix this with another promise, another excuse. In a moment of clarity, I knew what I had to do. I had to let her go. I had to set her free, because I wasn't the man she needed, not the way I was now. And so I did. I told her we should break up. I told her I was sorry, but I couldn't be the partner she deserved. She didn't argue. She didn't try to change my mind. Instead, she stood up, kissed my forehead, and quietly walked out the door. I sat there, stunned, as I realized I had just made the hardest decision of my life. I had let her go because I wasn't willing to change. Because I was so caught up in my belief that success was everything, that I had forgotten what really mattered. I remember the silence in the room as I sat alone, staring at the door she had just walked through. It was the kind of silence that makes your soul ache. The days after Emily left felt like walking through a fog. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, not just with her leaving, but with everything I had built my life around. The success, the long hours, the focus on work. All of it felt empty now. Emily's absence was like a void, a hole that I couldn't fill no matter how hard I tried. At first, I told myself it was just a matter of time. Time heals all wounds, right? I tried to keep busy, diving into work even more than before, thinking if I could just get ahead, really get ahead, then everything would fall into place. I even told a few friends that I was better off. That I'd eventually find someone else who understood my drive. But deep down, I knew the truth: there was no one else. There was no one who would ever love me the way Emily did. She wasn't just some person I could replace. She was the one who had always seen me. The real me, the me that wasn't defined by my bank account or job title, but by who I was when I was with her. And now, I was alone. I couldn't let go of the belief that I was somehow right in my decision, though. I kept telling myself that the breakup was necessary, that I wasn't the person I needed to be to give her the life she deserved. I convinced myself that my career would fulfill me in ways that Emily never could. After all, I was doing all of this for the future, for us, wasn't I? But slowly, something started to shift in my mind. I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Success wasn't the answer. It wasn't the cure. What I really needed was balance. The kind of balance I had given up in the pursuit of everything else. I started to see that I wasn't alone because Emily didn't love me anymore. I was alone because I had failed to love her in the way she needed. I had failed to prioritize the connection we shared. Instead of working on us, I had worked for something that ultimately meant nothing without her by my side. I began to accept that the pain I was feeling wasn't just about losing her, it was about losing myself in the process. I had become so obsessed with building a perfect future that I had forgotten to live in the present, to nurture the love that had once been so easy. The truth was hard to swallow. I wanted to believe that I had made the right choice, that my sacrifice would eventually pay off, but I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I had pushed her away, and now I had to live with the consequences. The hardest part, though, wasn't the emptiness of the house or the quiet nights without her. It was the reflection I saw in the mirror every morning. I had spent so much time convincing myself that success would make me whole, that it would make me enough, but now I was left questioning everything. Who was I, really, if I wasn't the man with the career, the man with the answers, the man who always seemed to have it together? Emily was gone. I had no one to come home to. No one to talk to about my day, to share those little moments with. I had isolated myself so much in my pursuit of success that I couldn't even remember what it was like to just enjoy someone's company without the pressure of always needing to be on. I started noticing things about myself that I had never really paid attention to before. Small insecurities that I had pushed to the back of my mind now seemed to be all I could think about. Was I too focused on the wrong things? Had I become so consumed by my work and my goals that I had lost the person who mattered most? In the quiet moments of the day, when I wasn't preoccupied with distractions, I couldn't escape the thoughts. I kept telling myself that I had done what was necessary, that I had made the tough call, but deep down, I wasn't sure anymore. I felt inadequate, like I wasn't enough, not as a man and certainly not as a partner. I wasn't just grieving the loss of Emily, I was grieving the version of myself that I had let slip away. What hurt the most was that I wasn't sure if I would ever feel whole again. The self-assurance I had once carried, the confidence that came from my career and ambition, now felt fragile. Without Emily, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The version of me that had convinced her I was worth being with now seemed distant and unrecognizable. I had this growing fear that I would never feel truly good enough again. That my self-worth would always be tied to what I had achieved and never to the love and connections I had let slip through my fingers. And if I couldn't even love myself, how could I ever expect anyone else to? But even in the midst of that self-doubt, I realized something important. Maybe I hadn't been broken, but rather, I was being reshaped. Maybe the pain was a sign that I was being forced to look at myself honestly, to confront the parts of me that I had neglected or overlooked for so long. Maybe, just maybe, this was the opportunity one needed to rebuild, to finally be the man I was supposed to be. The days turned into weeks, and the emotional turmoil didn't ease up, it only deepened. I thought time would heal everything, but instead, it seemed to magnify the pain. There were moments when I thought I was doing okay, when I could push the sadness aside long enough to get through the day. But then, out of nowhere, something would remind me of Emily, and the weight of loss would crash over me like a tidal wave. It was in the small things. The empty side of the bed that I once shared with her. The photos of our trips together gathering dust in a drawer. I'd pass by the places we used to go, the spots that held memories of us laughing and talking for hours, and the ache would hit me all over again. The life I had taken for granted, the life I had let slip away, it was gone now. I started to realize how much I had relied on her, not just as a partner, but as my emotional anchor. Emily had been the one who kept me grounded when I became too consumed with work. She had been the person who reminded me that there was more to life than just checking off boxes. She loved me, not because of my career, but despite it. She loved me for who I was, for the way I showed up for her, before I got lost in the chase for success, and now she was gone. And all I could do was look at the mess I had made. There were nights when the loneliness felt unbearable. I would sit on the couch, staring at the TV but not really seeing anything, feeling like a stranger in my own life. I had spent so many years building a future without her, without truly appreciating what we had, that I didn't know how to be alone. The silence in the house felt suffocating. But it wasn't just the silence that hurt. It was the regret. I had so many what ifs running through my mind. What if I had balanced my career and my relationship better? What if I had paid attention to the signs that she was drifting away? What if I had loved her better, been there more for her? I started replaying all the moments I had taken for granted, all the times I had brushed off her concerns or put work ahead of her needs. I couldn't undo the past, no matter how much I wanted to. And the weight of that realization, that I had let her slip through my fingers, tore me apart. I wasn't just heartbroken because I had lost someone I loved. I was heartbroken because I had failed to be the man I promised I would be. And no matter how much I tried to justify it, no amount of success could fill the hole that she left behind. The months following the breakup felt like living in a perpetual state of limbo. I was stuck between two worlds, one where I had Emily, and another where I was supposed to move on, to keep pushing forward with my life. But how do you move on when the person you love is still living in your memories, still lingering in every thought and every decision you make? I started to ask myself tough questions. Was I better off without her? Could I truly build a future without the person who had been by my side for so long? I'd had these conversations with myself more times than I could count, but the answer always seemed just out of reach. Part of me wanted to push her out of my mind, to convince myself that I could go on without her. After all, I had a life to live, right? I had goals, a career that needed my attention. But every time I tried to focus on work, on the things I could control, I found myself looking over my shoulder, wishing she was there. The house felt too quiet, the space too large. I wasn't sure how to fill it. In the quiet moments, I could almost hear her voice, see her smile, remember how we had once made each other laugh for hours. Then there was the flip side, the part of me that wanted to convince myself that I was better off alone, that I could do it all on my own, that I didn't need her. But the more I told myself this, the more I realized it wasn't the truth. I was fooling myself. I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to fix what had been broken. But was it even possible? Could I really go back to her after everything I had done? Was it too late? The fear of rejection, of being vulnerable again, gnawed at me. I had already hurt her. I had already caused the damage. Would she even want to try again? Or was the damage too great to repair? And yet, the thought of moving on without her seemed equally unbearable. Every time I considered a life without Emily, I couldn't shake the feeling that something essential was missing. My heart wasn't ready to let go, no matter how many times my mind tried to convince me that it was the best thing to do. I knew deep down that I hadn't made peace with my decision, that I hadn't truly come to terms with the fact that I was still in love with her. In those moments of self-doubt, I realized something important. This wasn't just about whether to stay or leave. It was about whether I was willing to grow, to change, and to fight for what was worth fighting for. Emily and I had our issues, sure, but that didn't mean everything was lost. Maybe I hadn't been the partner she deserved, but maybe, just maybe, I could be the man she needed me to be. If I was willing to put in the work. At this crossroads, I knew I had to make a decision. Was I going to stay stuck in the past, drowning in my own guilt and regret, or was I going to take a leap of faith and try to make things right? The choice was mine. As the weight of my decisions grew heavier, I knew I couldn't carry it all alone. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, and every time I tried to make sense of things, it only felt more complicated. That's when I realized I needed to lean on others, the people who cared about me, the ones who could offer a different perspective, and perhaps most importantly, the people who could remind me that I wasn't alone in this. I turned to my friends first. I hadn't been the best at maintaining those relationships over the years, especially during the times when I was so absorbed in work and the pressures of life. But now, I realized just how much I needed them. I reached out to Matt, one of my closest friends from college. He'd always been there for me, even when we went years without talking. When we met for coffee, I could tell he saw the weight I was carrying. He didn't need to ask what was wrong, the exhaustion on my face was enough of a clue. After some small talk, I found myself spilling everything to him. How Emily and I had fallen apart, how I'd lost my way with her, how I was torn between trying to fix things or moving on. I told him how much I regretted letting her slip through my fingers. I was embarrassed to admit it, but the burden had been suffocating, and I needed someone to listen. Matt didn't give me any quick fixes or advice right away. Instead, he listened, really listened, and I realized that, for the first time in weeks, I felt heard. His presence was comforting, and for a moment, it felt like a weight was lifted off my chest. I could finally breathe a little easier. Michael, I know you're going through a tough time, but you've got to be kind to yourself, he said after I'd finished pouring my heart out. You're human. You made mistakes. But that doesn't mean you can't learn from them and make things right. If you want to fight for this relationship, then go for it. But if it's time to move on, don't do it out of guilt. Do it because you're ready. And either way, you have people who care about you. His words stuck with me. It wasn't just about making the right decision, it was about giving myself the grace to make that decision from a place of understanding, not shame. I wasn't perfect, and neither was Emily, but I didn't have to carry this burden alone. That evening, I also called my sister, Laura. We hadn't talked much recently, but she was someone who always knew how to cut through the noise. When I told her what was going on, she didn't offer any judgment. She just said, "You've always been the kind of person who tries to fix things." And I admire that. But sometimes, fixing things starts with fixing yourself first. Make sure you know what you really need, Michael. It's not about making Emily happy, it's about making sure you're happy. 2. It wasn't easy to hear, but Laura's words resonated deeply. She was right. I had spent so long thinking about what Emily needed, what I had done wrong, that I had forgotten to think about my own well-being. I needed to understand what I wanted, what would truly bring me peace, before I could decide what to do next. By the time I hung up the phone, I felt a little lighter. The advice was simple, but it felt like a breakthrough. I realized I didn't have to figure everything out right away. I could take time, reflect, and most importantly, take care of myself. And in doing so, I would be in a better place to decide what came next for me and for Emily. It wasn't about rushing to fix things. It was about finding clarity, and trusting that I wasn't alone in this journey. After weeks of internal struggle, I finally realized something crucial. Healing wasn't something that could be rushed. I had spent so much time trying to control everything around me, trying to fix my relationship, trying to make the right decisions, that I had neglected my own well-being. The truth was, I wasn't going to be able to rebuild anything, whether it was my relationship with Emily or my own peace of mind, until I took the time to heal and rebuild myself first. The first step was to stop trying to avoid the pain. I had spent so long distracting myself from the hurt, but the more I ignored it, the more it festered. So I allowed myself to feel everything I had been running from. I gave myself the permission to be sad, to be angry, to feel lost. There were nights when I'd lie awake, wondering if I'd made the right decision in breaking up with Emily. The self-doubt was overwhelming at times, and I found myself questioning my choices over and over again. But in those moments of quiet reflection, I also found a deep well of strength. I realized that healing didn't mean erasing the past or pretending the pain didn't exist. It meant learning to live with it, understanding that it was part of my journey. I didn't have to have everything figured out. I didn't have to be perfect. All I needed to do was keep moving forward, even when it felt like I was taking 2 steps back for every one I took forward. Part of this healing process was focusing on myself in ways I hadn't in years. I took time for things I loved but had long neglected, things like reading, writing, and even going for long walks. I rediscovered the simple pleasures that had once brought me joy, before everything had become so complicated and rushed. I also realized how important it was to get back to my own values. I had always prided myself on being a caring person, someone who could be counted on in times of need. But in the whirlwind of my career and the pressure of maintaining a relationship, I had lost sight of that. I had stopped showing up for myself. Now, I was starting to show up for me. It felt freeing to reconnect with my own needs, my own desires, without worrying about what anyone else expected of me. I also worked on building my physical strength. I started hitting the gym more regularly, using the time to clear my head and regain a sense of control over my life. There was something incredibly empowering about pushing myself to be stronger. Not just physically but mentally as well. Every drop of sweat, every rep I did, felt like I was shedding layers of the emotional weight I had been carrying. But perhaps the most important part of my healing journey was the realization that it was okay to be vulnerable. For so long, I had prided myself on being the one who had all the answers, the one who always knew what to do. But in this moment, I had no answers. I was lost, confused, and scared. And that was okay. It was okay to admit that I didn't have it all figured out. Through this process, I started to reconnect with myself in ways I hadn't allowed in years. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was starting to feel like myself again. I could feel the healing starting to take hold, little by little. I could see a future where I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, no matter what happened with Emily or with my relationship. I had begun the journey of rebuilding, of finding strength from within. It was slow, sometimes painful, but ultimately empowering. I knew that no matter what came next, I would be okay. And that realization gave me the courage to move forward, one step at a time. As time passed, I began to find myself in a place I never expected, one of quiet contentment. The chaos of the breakup had subsided, and though the pain was still there, it no longer dominated my every thought. I had come to realize that healing wasn't about eliminating the past, but learning to live with it, letting it inform my future without letting it hold me back. Slowly but surely, I had started to find peace, and with that peace came an openness to the possibility of something new. It was a Saturday afternoon when I met Sarah. I was at a mutual friends gathering, something small and casual that I had almost skipped. I hadn't been eager to get back into the dating scene, but I knew I needed to push myself to start living again, not just existing, but truly experiencing life. And that afternoon, life brought me Sarah. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was warm, easy to talk to, but I wasn't expecting anything more than a pleasant conversation. However, as the afternoon went on, I found myself genuinely enjoying her company. She wasn't like anyone I had met in a long time. There was something grounded about her, something calm and real that resonated with me. We shared laughs, swapped stories, and before I knew it, hours had passed. We exchanged numbers, and in the days that followed, we began texting regularly. I wasn't looking for a relationship at the time, and I made that clear to her. I explained that I had been through a lot recently, that I wasn't in a place to dive headfirst into anything serious. But Sarah didn't seem put off by my honesty. She respected it, and that only deepened my appreciation for her. She was understanding and patient, never pushing me, never rushing things. But over the next few months, I realized something surprising. I was starting to open up to the idea of trust again. I hadn't realized how guarded I had become after everything that had happened with Emily. Trust had been shattered in a way that felt irreparable. I hadn't thought I could ever allow myself to be that vulnerable with someone again. But with Sarah, things felt different. She didn't rush anything, and that was exactly what I needed. There were no expectations, no pressure. Our connection grew slowly, at its own pace. With every conversation, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that maybe love didn't have to be this complex, this fraught with fear and uncertainty. Maybe, just maybe, it could be easy. Maybe it could feel like it was supposed to, natural, comfortable, and built on mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as we sat on a bench overlooking the city skyline, Sarah looked at me with those gentle eyes and said something that took me by surprise. You don't have to have everything figured out, Michael. It's okay to be where you are right now. I'm not here to rush you. I'm here because I think we could build something really beautiful, together. But only if you're ready. Her words, so simple yet so profound, were the final step in what had been a long process of me learning to trust again. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of my past holding me back. I didn't feel like I was dragging the remnants of a broken relationship into a new one. With Sarah, I realized that trust could be earned, not demanded. It could be built slowly, piece by piece, and it didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be real. In that moment, I knew I wasn't ready to rush into a full-blown relationship, but I was finally ready to let go of the fear. I was ready to allow myself to enjoy what we had, no matter where it would lead, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. As time passed, my relationship with Sarah deepened in ways I hadn't imagined possible. What started as a friendship had slowly blossomed into something real, something steady, and surprisingly joyful. I was no longer just healing, I was thriving. My life had shifted from a place of pain and uncertainty to one of hope and excitement. The scars from my past relationship with Emily were still there, but they no longer defined me. Instead, I carried the lessons learned from those difficult times, lessons that had allowed me to grow, both as a person and as a partner. One of the biggest changes I noticed was how differently I viewed love now. In the past, I had thought of love as something that should come with a certain set of rules, expectations, and standards, a perfect image of what it should be. But with Sarah, everything felt different. There were no grand promises of forever, no pressure to fit into some idealized mold. Instead, we simply enjoyed being in each other's company. The connection we shared was genuine, not built on illusions or fantasy, but on real, lived experiences. There was no rush to define what we were. We didn't need labels or grand gestures to validate our feelings. Sarah's calm presence and unwavering support gave me the space to breathe, to be myself without fear of judgment. She encouraged me to chase after the things that made me happy, whether it was pursuing my career with newfound energy or exploring new hobbies that reignited my passion. I felt like I was truly living again, not just existing. And for the first time in a long time, I had the confidence to be the person I wanted to be, not the person I thought I needed to be for someone else. Our relationship wasn't without challenges, of course. No relationship ever is. But what stood out to me was how we handled conflict. In the past, I had been quick to retreat or avoid tough conversations, too scared to face discomfort. But with Sarah, I found that it was okay to argue, to disagree, as long as we were willing to listen and grow from the experience. There was no fear of being judged or criticized. We were two individuals coming together, not because we were perfect, but because we were willing to work through our imperfections together. One weekend, as we drove out to a small coastal town for a getaway, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come. The weight of my past had gradually lightened, and with Sarah by my side, I felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. For the first time in years, I was genuinely happy, not because everything was perfect, but because I had learned to embrace the imperfections of life. As we stood on a beach at sunset, Sarah's hand in mine, I realized something that filled my heart with warmth. The love we had wasn't just about the good times, the laughter, or the beautiful moments. It was also about the quiet moments of understanding, the growth, and the willingness to face challenges together. It wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone who would walk beside you, even when the road wasn't smooth. I knew then that this was real. The love I had with Sarah wasn't some fleeting, idealized version of romance. It was grounded in reality, built on mutual respect, trust, and a shared vision for the future. And I was excited to see where that future would take us. In the months that followed, our relationship only grew stronger. We continued to build a life together, not defined by any one event or expectation but by our ability to support one another through life's ups and downs. I realized that love, at its core, wasn't about perfection, it was about connection. understanding, and the willingness to grow together. Looking back on everything I had been through, the heartbreak, the pain, the confusion, I understood the lesson I had needed to learn all along. Love is not about finding the right person, it's about being the right person, being open to change, and being ready to build something real with someone who shares your values, your dreams, and your willingness to grow. And with Sarah, I had found that.